Sure. And then we'll open for discussion. You guys have all been kind of talking as it was, but then we'll open for discussion. If anybody has any questions or whatever, we can chat some more.
All right.
John, welcome.
Well, thank you guys very much. I was just going to read you guys the closing of the book. Just a couple of minutes on what got me here. Basically, I've had the pleasure of working with families across the state of California for the last 25 years as a financial advisor. So it's not like a friendship where they tell you certain things. I actually know what's going on in their lives and what they're really scared about and what they really put their money into, what is most important to them. And I found things that are important to everybody. Good schools, safe roads, safe healthcare. All of these items are pretty much ubiquitously wanted. What I found, though, is that half of my clients are getting a very different set of facts than the other half of my clients. And it's almost like a modern Tower of Babel, where people aren't even able to really communicate anymore. And I think that that's terrible. So things like this coming together, I think this is the antidote to AI and all of the fake things and the bots and the anger that is being riled up out there for people. So anyway, I will dive in and read you guys the closing here. But should I close this? All right.
Bring you back to your
Yeah, exactly. I know. I was like, I need to go grab some carts. Yes. I still have nightmares about I missed my shift at Trader Joe's. Yeah. Abundant California, abundant nation. America today feels like a nation stuck on a psychiatrist's couch. The two dominant political parties have become caricatures of Freud's most infamous constructs. The Republican Party has become the id, pure impulse, chasing gratification at all costs. Cut taxes now. Build walls now. Own the libs now. Long-term consequences? Who cares? The id doesn't plan. It reacts. It rages. The Democratic Party has become the superego, the moral perfectionist with a savior complex. It seeks justice, fairness, and equality, noble goals, no doubt, but often in ways that are not connected to everyday reality. The superego pushes purity over pragmatism, even when it alienates the very people it claims to fight for. What we desperately lack is the ego, the balancing force, the rational, grounded adult in the room, not driven by desire or guilt, but by results. That's what independence in California must represent, the steadying force that integrates the passion with practicality and ideals with outcomes. This is not about splitting the difference or compromising for the sake of compromise. It's about integration, taking the raw passion of the id and the noble aspirations of the superego and channeling those into something that actually works. For most of my life, balance has been my obsession. As a financial advisor, balance is what I help my clients pursue. The sweet spot between saving and enjoying life, risk and reward. As a husband and father, it's the struggle between professional ambition and cherished family moments. As a pilot, I know balance isn't a luxury, it's survival. And as an American, I realize that balance isn't just missing from our politics, it's actively under attack. We've become a nation addicted to extremes, amplified by media narratives, tribal politicians, influential algorithms, and social media echo chambers. But when everything is an emergency, nothing truly gets solved. The solution isn't to veer harder to the left or to double down on the right. It's to do what every thoughtful American knows we need to do, to recenter, rebalance, and rebuild. After almost 20 years at Merrill Lynch, I decided to walk away from a successful career that had defined much of my adult life. I had built deep relationships, achieved milestones, and worked with incredible clients. But I also felt constrained. The system, while powerful, had grown rigid and risk-averse in my view, prioritizing the institution over the individual. And I realized that to operate at my highest level, to innovate, to challenge convention, to truly serve people with independence of thought, I needed to step away and build something of my own. Leaving wasn't easy. It was a leap into uncertainty, but it was also the most liberating decision of my professional life. That leap gave birth to Echo 45 Advisors, and with it, a new understanding of what independence really means. I now feel that way about California. For our state to function at its highest level, it too must reclaim its independence. Independence from party dictates, corporate capture, and bureaucratic inertia. California has all the raw talent, creativity, and wealth needed to thrive. But like any great professional, hello, come on in. Hello, good to see you guys. Good to see you, man. Yeah, good. But like any great professional trapped in a system that no longer serves them, it must choose to chart its own course. Only through independent leadership can we unleash the full potential of this state and the people who call it home. This conviction is why I believe that we need a new political home. A set of values rooted deeply in logic, fairness, financial discipline, community service, technology, and above all, balance. We need leadership that listens instead of shouting, leads instead of blaming, and governs instead of playing games. This book isn't radical, it's radically sensible. It's a call to every American who feels politically homeless, the 80% of us who are tired of performative nonsense and are desperate to return to basic decency, honesty, hard work, fairness, and yes, balance. This book has been about reclaiming the promise of California through independence, balance, and abundance. Across these chapters, I've shared stories from my own life and from those who I serve. Stories of frustration with broken systems, but also of hope, ingenuity, and resilience. Each policy, each reform, and each idea presented here is not theory. It's a step in a master plan to prove that government can still work and that California can still lead. The choice before us is clear. We can continue to drift, allowing polarization, bureaucracy, and inertia to sap our strength. Or we can choose to act with urgency, to govern at the speed of Henderson, to bring a fiduciary ethic to public service, and demand a return on citizenship for every Californian. That is how we restore trust, rebuild dignity, and create opportunity. I believe deeply that when Californians come together to build, not just argue and not point fingers, but to actually build, we rediscover respect where contempt once lived. We find common cause in solving problems that affect us all: wildfires, homelessness, healthcare, housing, education, safety. Every time we notch a win together, we prove to ourselves and the nation that progress is still possible. California can be proudly purple, neither red nor blue, but a blend that honors our diversity of thought and experience. That is our strength. Proud purple means taking the best ideas from all sides, discarding the extremes, and focusing on what works. It means that the government answers only to the people and not to parties or special interests. It means making California a place worth fighting for, worth staying in, and worth passing on to our children. If California leads with independence and abundance, the nation will follow. That is our responsibility and our opportunity. Together, we can turn the page from scarcity to abundance, from contempt to respect, from drift to momentum. Together, we can build an abundant California, and in doing so, spark an abundant nation. Thank you for joining me on this journey. I am not a career politician. I am an executive, an advisor, a husband, a father, and above all, someone who deeply loves people, Californians, Americans, and people everywhere. I believe that we all have the power to help each other if we can just clear the noise. Balance is not weakness. Balance is strength, and it's how we move forward together. Any questions? Thank you guys for joining. Yes, please.
And I know there was some recent, from reading the New York Times, I noticed there was some recent cultural discussion around abundance, which I didn't really delve into, but I was wondering what it means to you.
So did you read the book Abundance by Ezra Klein and Derek Thompson by any chance? I was writing my book and then I discovered their book and I went, oh, they did a much better job of like a lot of the points that I was making in my book. And what I love about Abundance, the book, and I do think it was kind of creating a movement, right? Because there's been this NIMBY movement in California that's been very strong, and now Abundance is more of a YIMBY, yes in my backyard kind of a movement. But I think that that book is so powerful because it's a critique of the left from the left. And that's why I love about Anthony Scaramucci and others that are a critique of the right from the right. Okay, because it's a way for you to learn from people. If you're not in that echo chamber, if you don't really understand those things, they're almost like a translator, you know what I mean? So I do everything I can to learn from both sides and hear those things. But that book was amazing because it really did lay bare why we have these issues, why we couldn't get high-speed rail completed, you know, why we can't build things in California anymore, why things take, why 40% of the cost of a build, you know, is before you break ground, you know. So hello, good to see you. Yeah, good to see you. This is our neighbor, Carolyn. So that, yeah, it's absolutely referring directly to that book, and the great job that they did of outlining many of the problems that I was trying to address in my book. Of course, their book was written over a number of years. Yes, absolutely. I think that critique, that inner critique, is so important for us to get back to. And I think that's what the parties used to do, is they would kind of police the crazies, within their realms, and then now we've kind of gotten to this. And what Monica and I learned very quickly is that the most extreme people are the only people that want to donate and get involved in like a monetary way. Then I quickly realized that's why, you know what I mean? Like, you can't just be a normal person and kind of get even noticed. Really, you kind of got to do some crazy thing, have a viral moment, good or bad, but yeah, it's the people that are most extreme. And that's the problem in our politics. I think has been pulled to the outside, where now the parties don't have any real power at all. In fact, if you look at this race here, the Democrats are saying, hey, you could have a double Republican, general if you don't have people drop. None of them dropped out. I mean, eventually Betty E did. And of course, Eric was kind of forced to. But yeah, I don't think, I don't know. I mean, the vast majority of them have stayed in the race. So I don't know that the parties have really are even serving much of a purpose anymore, but I know that they're causing a lot of problems. Yeah.
You mentioned a bureaucracy. It sounded like you were talking about abandoning or addressing bureaucracy in one way. Do you know of a bureaucracy which you could point to, which you think is a good one? And then which one are you thinking of is the one you would want to address the most?
Actually, I think a lot of bureaucracy are good ones. I don't have a problem with bureaucracy in general, but I do think that what we're CEQA, which is the main point of that they get into in abundance, is that's it's standard. Yeah, exactly. So that has been used now to kind of keep things in stasis for years and years and years, where you can kind of keep projects from ever getting rolling by just suing over and over and over again. So I think there should be some tweaks to that, to bring that back into, you don't just have a free for all. We're not looking to be Houston tomorrow, but I think you do need to open up the gates so you can actually have some new development created.
So that's more or less than you're thinking more of a housing and development.
Yeah, but I have a whole chapter on revamping the DMV. I think that's one of the ways that people interact with their government on a daily basis, and it's awful, and people hate it. And so why are we doing that? We could do it so much better. So I want the DMV to feel like an Apple store. You know what I mean? Like, you walk in there and you enjoy it. And you get what you need. But yeah, I've got a lot of out of box ideas that actually would throw out certain systems because they wouldn't even be needed anymore. We have a whole chapter on power to the people, which is basically not allowing publicly traded utilities any longer in California. So a lot of my clients are PG&E retirees, and over the years, they kind of explained what happened at that company, and it's just no longer like a family company. It's now just a publicly traded company that's trying to extract as much value for shareholders as possible. And to me, that is a conflict of interest between what people need. I think they might have some water. Anything child friendly? Sorry.
You speak to these normal, how do you get to the normal people to make this all of us together that's going to have that abundance? And just looking at the countries that were poor or illiterate 30 years ago, and now they're abundant.
Yeah.
And they seem very happy because what they had 30 years ago was disastrous.
Yeah.
How do we talk to a rich area like California where everyone seems to have stuff, but they're still not satisfied? They all want to fight.
Yeah.
How do you talk to people like that?
I think when you get people together, they actually agree on almost a lot more than you would think, and I think that the differences are almost made up in a lot of ways. You know what I mean? When I see people actually talking, they don't get to these crazy, fringe issues. It's generally things that they want to talk about. So I think if you can actually get the conversation going, I'm just trying to get the conversation going. As the thing, I thought the book would be a way to kind of get that out there en masse and get some of these ideas out there. But yeah, it's been very difficult. Like we were talking about earlier, I can't get on the debate stage because I'm not polling at 3% and didn't raise $1 million. And to me, the people that have raised $1 million or more, they have people they have to answer to now. That's the problem. What are we doing to ourselves? Why are we only listening to the people who have political masters now? So to me, if I ruled the world, I would make it where there would be no money in politics, right? You would just be funded by the state itself. There'd be some metric, you put your name in the ring and some other way to see who would be acceptable on the ballot. And then everyone their ideas should be covered. But unfortunately now it's more of a popularity contest. We watched Jordan Klepper on The Daily Show, and he went through everyone in this race, and he said there's a lack of riz, is the problem. And it's seriously like that. If I just go be a big clown and do something stupid, you know what I mean? That's probably the way that I would get recognized. Oh, charisma. So a lack of charisma. They're saying Javier Becerra is now surging because he's the boring guy, because they're lurched from Eric Swalwell, who was smeared with controversy. And then they went to the most boring guy. Like, he seems like the safest one. And he's like, they're making fun of him because he's like got his drink outside of the theater. Anyway, it's very Daily Show. But I was like, I should just film this clown video and send it to Jordan Klepper. And that's probably the thing that would get everybody to notice, oh, this guy is funny. Because I think people want to be entertained more than they want to be governed. And I think that's what got us to Donald Trump. I think people got to a certain nihilistic view of things that if it's not going to be better, let's just burn it down. And that's what got us here. But I mean, to your point, I mean, there's a lot of wealth here. There's a lot of things being thrown around. I don't support, the one-time wealth tax on billionaires because I know a lot of people with a lot of money and they'll just move. They won't change their life. They will just move their operations on paper to a different state, preferably one with no state tax too. So, that's a bad idea.
I'm seeing that in a lot of headlines lately. So many companies closing down in California and moving their operations to another state.
Yeah. Which is awful too.
Tax too.
It's yeah.
It's not a solution. It's just one time.
Oh, the wealth tax. Yeah, it was just a one-time tax. I'm telling you, there's like 22 billionaires, I think, in the state. They'll all find they're all very easily can just not be Californians, very quickly.
If there was a magic wand and you could say that one thing, you're watching the debate.
Yeah.
They at the end, they said, what is the one thing? I was like, well, I don't remember anything actually from anybody. That's what they said. Maybe a couple.
Yeah.
So, what's that game changing notion? Because I think it's cultural too. And you have to kind of get that cultural
Sure.
change.
I would like to be remembered I'd like to be the governor that put his own money into a blind trust and then got all California lawmakers to put their money in a blind trust and then got every other state governor to follow suit and basically got all of the money out of politics from the state level because the feds are not going to do it. They keep voting it out and then they all get on the phone, they call each other and they vote it back in without going into session. Okay. Because they know they need that money. That's what they're all there for. But now they're just fundraising constantly. And they're only doing what they're told to do by this. So I would love to be the guy that gets in there to tear all that down.
And what would that mean for people who don't think?
People who don't manage money all day? Basically, yeah, the country, I think, is on the wrong track because we have massive conflicts of interest. I believe that every one of our lawmakers has now taken on so much money from people that they have to do their bidding, and it's not what they're elected to do. And I think that's very frustrating for people. And then they find a way to get rid of term limits, and then they kind of stay there forever. And the whole thing has now become very corrupted. The states have the power to say if you're a state legislator in California, you have to put your money in a blind trust. If you're going to have insider information or you're going to affect policy and you can actually go put a trade in and make money for yourself, which is now happening very blatantly. We were talking earlier about the woman at the SEC whose job it was to investigate those crimes. They were not allowing her to do so she quit and they didn't replace her. So it's just free for all right now for these massive trades that are being dropped minutes before big news. And if you wanted to catch the people, you could, but there's no interest in doing that right now. So the states, I think, could step up and just send our lawmakers to Washington, D.C. with blinders on. And I think that could be the best positive impact I could bring. Mass timber, blanketing the state in solar. These are things that I want to do. I had an experience with PG&E. It took my wife and I a year and a half to get solar on our house. It felt more like we were competing with them. They were the ones who actually held the keys to what we wanted to do, but they were negatively affected by it, and we could feel that. And so the whole thing was wrong. You know what I mean? So they just kept taking away panels. Go back to the review, Walnut Creek, PG&E, Walnut Creek, PG&E. After like the third review of back and forth, they finally got us down to enough panels that they could guarantee we would never generate more power than we use. And to me, that should be a side hustle for everyone. If you can get anywhere you can put panels and you can get money coming in, you should be able to sell a kilowatt hour of power for a set amount throughout the day. My vision would be that you'd have so much power being generated at certain points where you could actually, like a jug, show up with your battery, and fill that up for free at certain points during the day and go power your things that you need to go power, but the incentives are not there. If the state owned the grid, there'd be no reason for us not to get as much solar out there as possible. It's a very eloquent solution. It's the buyouts, the bankruptcy, a few times, like the stock's gone down to like 6, and then they got the bailout. So the United States keeps doing this. Like we're capitalists until we get to like this point of pain, and then we're not anymore. Exactly. Yeah. And so then they learn. They don't learn, the whole point of capitalism, when you burn, you're supposed to go down, and then people learn from that and they go, oh, don't do that again. You know what I mean? But they go, oh, we're so big, we can't fail. Let's just keep doing it. Let's just do it again, because if it works, great. If it doesn't work, we're gonna get bailed out. Exactly. Yeah. So the only way to do that now is to uproot it, get rid of it. Don't allow publicly traded gas or or electric utilities in the state of California. Yeah.
Others.
We do it here. We have municipally run, like EBMUD. I mean, you have, and they have lower rates and better service across the board. Yeah. So it's already happening here. But I would like to see microgrids decentralized, get the grid so, one part goes down, everything else is still humming. Yeah. I mean, wind is great, but solar's, it's passive, it's easy, it works, it's low maintenance. And I believe in high-speed rail. I've got a chapter on that as well. Abundance does a great job of talking about how that got parsed down to like Merced, wherever. I don't even know where the current line is, but it doesn't make any sense because now we have this political game where if you win, my job is now to make sure you don't get what you want. Okay, and then we just kind of go back and forth in that. And now that it's been gerrymandered down to the lowest level, it'll be interesting to see what happens.
How do you break? I mean, you hear these polls where almost all Americans want something.
Yeah.
You can't get it. It's the politicians stopping us or whatever mechanics of that is.
Mm.
But we all want gun control, not gun control, but sensible gun stuff, right? We want to build homes. All that.
Yeah, no, it's the Second Amendment thing's interesting. People want safety, I think, is the idea. I think everybody agrees on that. They want safe.
But we
You want
can't
safe.
There's just all these things that we all want, which is our commonality, right?
Mhm.
But none of us get it because everyone's separating us and stopping from each other from getting
Yep.
it. And that's just not a good society. That's just that's going downhill until some other country's going to take over and say, haha, we were doing it all this time while you guys were destroying yourself.
Yeah.
That's Rome again, right? Something like that. So that's what concerns me about our wonderful state, which I love. We have clients all across the country and all I hear is California sucks, right?
Yeah. It's the marketing. Yeah.
And I have to say, no, it doesn't. It's amazing here. You have no idea how wonderful
Yeah.
our life is. Yeah.
Well, we talk about this too. Hollywood exported a vision of California for decades that, made everybody want to come here. Disneyland, it was very iconic. And then now you have movies being made everywhere and you have Taylor Sheridan putting out, we love to watch things like Landman, and every Californian in these shows is the dumbest. They can't even stand up straight. I mean, they can't get away from the rattlesnake. It's right there. Just step away. No, I'm so Californian. I'm so dumb. That's where we are. The whole state is covered in feces. We're all so dumb. We can't walk and chew gum. And, that is the perception that's out there, but we're the fourth largest economy on the planet. But I believe that there's also a lot of like hater there. You know what I mean? Like Texas versus California. And I think that's obnoxious too. That's, Texas is actually the mirror opposite of us as far as their gerrymandering. Yeah. You got about 60% of that state voting Republican, but it's a very red state, so the 40% that votes Democratic has no voice. And then the mirror opposite is true here.
So I think it's a cultural shift. So how do you speak to those people? I don't see anybody speaking other than negatively.
And I think sadly that's all that they want. There was this, I don't know if you guys know who Andrew Callahan, Channel 5 is, but they do these surrounded things, right? You have one person who's this and you have 20 people who are the opposite. And that's this thing now. They call it Jubilee. And it's like this thing, one person will sit there. Yeah, Tallarico did one. But they had one where he was, it was 20 conspiracy theorists sitting around, a reporter basically. And he was kind of like getting into their ideas. He's like, that's actually really interesting. And they're like, no. He said they pulled him aside and they're like, you can't agree with these people. You have to conflict. We may not even air this. And they weren't going to, they're going to throw it all away because there wasn't enough arguing. That's all people want to look at is people disagreeing and yelling at each other. And that's our own fault. So the fact that you guys are sitting here in a bookstore, thank you. Actually, you don't know who I am. You came out to hear ideas. That's amazing. Thank you. Kudos. But that's how hard it is, to actually get out and have a conversation. But I think, and the gun thing, I agree with you. My father's a cop. I had a loaded handgun on the credenza from when I was born. Okay. My mom's a licensed marriage family therapist. That's what my book's about. I'm the balance. I've got both of these extremes, in my family upbringing. But the gun thing, I mean, I'm a shooter. I shoot. I own guns. I go shoot. And to me, as a shooter in California, and the large percent of the state that is Republican and believes more in Second Amendment freedoms, these kinds of things, to them, that's a reason they have left the state. I have a lot of clients that have actually left California over that one issue because they cannot get the firearms that they're looking for here. And I do have some firearms that are ridiculous looking because they are California legal, and you have to do some stupid things to these guns, and that makes it actually far more dangerous. Okay. And when you go to the range, the guys are like, get that California legal crap out of here. I'm like, I don't want to commit a felony. You know what I mean? But they're like, yeah, but you're going to end up shooting someone with that, because like it's going to go off, it's going to get jammed. And that's the whole thing. So sometimes you have an idea and people safer, but then the people that make the rules don't know anything about the subject matter. And then you get some really dumb rules that come out that aren't making people safer, that are making a lot of people angry, making a lot of people money to get around these rules. And it happens almost immediately. Like they changed the rule. They basically outlawed Glocks. And then like within 24 hours, a company had come up with a black market thing for California buyers. So all you're doing is creating a black market Okay. If you're going to share a border with Arizona and you're going to share a border with Nevada that has 0 gun restrictions, like you can go there and buy a tank. You know what I mean? It's going to come into the state if they want to bring it in. And to be candid, all the California legal firearms are just as lethal.
Does this kind of boil back down to your whole idea of just taking money back out of politics?
The gun thing, actually, I would say the genie's out of the bottle. There's more guns than there are people in the United States. I don't think you're going to get rid of the guns. I think what you need to do is register every piece of them.
We would be able to sue.
I-
And we would be able to, like, coming back into working with them towards.
Sure. Tangibly, what I would do is say, hey, if you're going to own a gun, you have to register it. You have to register a car. You have to register, anything you could hurt somebody with.
For right now, they're protected, and you can't sue them.
Second Amendment, though. That's the first.
You can't.
Yeah.
You can own a gun, but
Yeah.
we still can't sue the manufacturer of the gun.
No.
Who's producing the product, which is putting us all in danger. Is there any reason? Like,
Sa-
why are they selling?
Well, that's happening.
AR-17s?
Yeah.
When there's no reason to have an AR-17.
Yeah.
It's patently a dangerous instrument. We should be able to sue them. Right?
Well, that's happening with glyphosate right now with Roundup. They're making it, the Trump administration making it so you can't sue them for that, and they're giving people cancer straight up. Yeah.
But the guns.
Sure. The current climate, I think that's a real uphill battle. I think what I would do is I would just be more tangible about it. If you want to have a gun, it has to be registered. That's another thing I would use blockchain for. And not just because this whole thing about the upper and the lower, like these people, like the part, every piece of the gun should be tracked. Okay. And if a piece of your gun shows up in a crime, then stiff penalties, very swift, very quick. That's how I would handle it. Because you have to have your rights. Guns don't make you violent. I've owned guns my whole life. I'm not a violent person. My daughter's never seen my guns. They're in a safe. But when my daughter is of age, I will take her and show her how to shoot. That's something I want to look forward to doing with my daughter. But it's something that I think we could get in front of, where if you have bad actors that are here committing crimes, I think you be very swift with those penalties and be very aggressive, but still allow people their freedoms.
Most hunters accept that you can only use certain kinds of weapons and certain kinds of ammunition on certain kinds of animals at certain kinds of year. They're already being regulated.
Yeah.
So I don't know why they can't make the leap to, it's already being regulated, and most hunters are responsible and accept that. So why can't they make the leap to other kinds of just regulation, not taking them away, but just
Sure. Because I think the biggest force is the NRA, and their view is that there should be no restrictions whatsoever on guns. And that's been kind of like, it's that or nothing, and that's kind of what got us here, right? Like there is no middle point. What you're saying is like a logical thing. Like, shouldn't we just, yes, absolutely. But all of this money that gets poured in, and the NRA is like, if they're going to, endorse, like, you cannot even have that, because that's a slippery slope. You say you can't have that, then what are they going to take next, kind of thing. And I think that's ridiculous. That should not be that we don't do that with any other freedom. We always have some restrictions. You can't yell fire in a crowded theater. There's, yeah. If the NRA had their way, that you'd be able to walk open carry with an AR-15 right now, you'd be able to walk around. Yeah, Wild West, Yeah, especially like on election day, right? They got these ballot watchers now. They're gonna be walking around with like bandoleros, like it's extremely intimidating. Yeah. But the interesting thing I'm finding is I find that more and my friends on the left are getting interested in becoming firearm owners now, because they're seeing what's happening, and they see that it's not going to be a very far leap before they start coming to their houses, right? Potentially. And I'll tell you that the most lethal firearm I own is 100% California legal. It's a shotgun, an automatic shotgun. Okay, you do more damage, way more damage with that than you could with an AR-15. I would argue, or just as much. And so why? What's the point, right? I mean, it's just, if you're going to have rules, I think they should work. That's my thing. That's why I'm opposed to I think that billionaires should pay more. You know what I mean? I think we should have gun controls, but the certain things that have not worked for those reasons. And it's always this all or nothing sort of a battle, unfortunately.
You were talking earlier about YIMBYism and NIMBY.
Yeah.
Can you address that just more? I mean, it was pretty broad. I'm asking.
Sure, yeah. Well, I think the reason California is so beautiful is because it is hard to build here. You can't just keep throwing up new construction everywhere, right? We've had a lot of land, that we have said you're not going to build here. Like, we've had really good, protections. The problem is a lot of people would argue, and Abundance does a great job of this, is that we've gone a little too far. And so the Not in My Backyard movement did a really good job of protecting California, but then it got so good at protecting, they actually forgot how to build anything, is the idea. And so getting back to a balance there. So the YIMBY movement is basically just where a lot of people, like some of my clients that would definitely be, considered more liberal in like Berkeley, and they were like, I do not want some 6-unit place going up next door and ruining my values. Now they're calling me, they're like, you know what? These poor people need homes. Like, I'm okay with them putting up a 6-unit place next door. That's the NIMBY to YIMBY that I'm talking about.
Right.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about housing? Because that's all we hear.
Yeah.
No housing. There's no housing. People talking about we have to build 7,000 homes by this time. And can you talk about that?
I think the research says 180,000 homes we need right now if you wanted to end the homelessness like tomorrow in California. That's about what we need. And then over the next decade, like 1 million additional homes. So that's what we talked about, mass timber. That is an out-of-the-box, innovative way that we could, create tons and tons of housing stock right now. So creating lots of new housing stock is the first way to do that. And then changing some rules, allowing building to happen a lot easier, and then completely looking at new ways to open up housing pathways. So right now, if you own a property, let's say you have a 1 acre property, you've lived there for 30 years. If you wanted to put an ADU on that property, you can't just sell that, right? You could rent it. It's still on your property. I would support quick condo conversion so that you could actually sell a 1/4 acre of that acre property, and then somebody gets to move into that. You could drop an ADU right on that property. Now you have somebody living very close to you, but that could be your niece or nephew, grandchild, and then later on it's going to be high density housing, but that's one new unit of housing. I talk in the book, I would pair that up with desertscaping, a requirement for desertscaping for the water usage, and then solar on the main home and on the ADU. So that I would actually support building California created ADUs that just you crank these things out, just tens of thousands of these things, and sell them from the state to the homeowner, allow them to quick condo convert. Now they're selling that. They get money in without having to downsize or take on debt in retirement. And then there's one more unit of housing. So
How does that relate to the forestation?
the deforestation, there's a lot of federal land, and so somebody's going to have to negotiate and let us in there and let us start doing this. But again, it's Vaughan Timbers is what I talk about in the book. They're up in Washington State, and that's how I learned about all this. But you watch them, it's like the Lorax. It's kind of sad. It's saying, and it cuts the tree off, rips the branches off, and throws it on a pile. But what they're doing is they're leaving the largest growth trees, which are the most fire resistant. And the logging industry, historically has gone in and taken the largest growth trees because that's the only trees that are big enough to get a beam out of. So by taking the small growth trees and leaving the larger trees behind, you create a lot more fire resistance. We can get away from the annual wildfire season, and then taking that abundance of lumber and turning that into mass timber. That's the ticket.
The environmental impacts of that type of logging.
That's the beautiful part about it. Yeah, so you're not only responsibly deforesting, dramatically reducing the wildfire risk, you're taking what would be kindling and turning it directly into housing, but trapping the carbon footprint into that.
You're still coming into rather sensitive and probably pristine areas. I don't know what the solution itself, but there's still impacts which are still occurring.
100%. Yeah, it's just when you compare it to steel and concrete building, infinitely better for the environment, infinitely better and substantially faster. The University of British Columbia, they put up a 18-story building in 70 days as mass timber. So yeah, and we actually went and looked at it while we were up there. Beautiful buildings. To me, it's a win-win. I love any win-win solutions, and to me, mass timber is a win-win.
All I'm saying is there's still impacts which we
Oh yeah. There's always going to be impacts of building, 100%, but that's why I want to go solar. That's why you have to have that balance, right? If we're going to have to keep creating more new housing units, we got to get people off the street, you give people dignity, you have to balance that. And so we have water usage issues. I have a whole chapter on water, using cisterns, putting a lot of money into desalinization research. There's countries in the Middle East that have half of their water supply coming from desalinization now.
If you were to be, let's say you won, you're in.
Okay.
You still got a mass Democratic side.
Sure.
Which we know is, like more or less a machine, and Republicans
Mm-hmm.
also a machine. How do you govern? What would you do?
As an independent, that's the thing, is I think that Republicans and Democrats can't even talk to each other anymore. They can't speak to each other, not publicly, not privately. You're on the other side. And so I think that as independents start getting elected, then that's going to change that equation a little bit. And people are going to have to actually have conversations. You're going to have to bring people to the table.
So you think there would have to be a movement to bring more independents into the legislature in order to actually be able to govern?
Well, I was saying as an independent governor, I think that you could bring both sides of our current legislature together and bring some of those ideas together. Yeah. But I mean, he was very likable. He had a lot of riz. He had a lot of riz. Exactly. Yeah.
I mean, it sounds like you believe that
Oh.
a lot of these people who act out, they don't really believe in this stuff. It's just how it's easier to talk that way.
Yes.
And get all this excitement and
Yes.
media and all this. But really, if they didn't have all that, they would actually work together. Because most people who are educated have some sense of pragmatic ideas. And
I just think there's a lot of low hanging fruit that both sides already agree on. And instead of focusing on working on those things and doing those things, they're going, yeah, that's great, but let's argue about these things that we don't agree on over here, and no one's doing anything. I just think that if you just remind people like, hey, we both want this, both sides want this, let's focus on that. And then through the action of doing that and scoring wins together, then you actually create this sort of environment where you can start to work together again. Yeah.
Answer, and is there a way to get around? Is there any way? To what extent do you think that that's blocking progress? Is there a way?
Oh, I think they just had this big tobacco moment, right? A couple of weeks ago, right? They just said it is addictive. It is damaging. So yeah, I'm hoping the punitive damages come in huge. I would love to see all those companies broken up. I mean, yeah, it's very, very bad for everything to have those companies controlling so many things. Yeah, absolutely. And I think that, if had Harris won, that would have been the response. Those companies would have been under pressure to break up. That would have been a focus. That is not a focus now whatsoever. We're not getting away from that right now. I manage money for clients. If you buy an S&P 500 mutual fund, 34 cents of your dollar that you're investing is going into the top 7 companies now. And so that is a bubble that is now being created, much like when I started in the business in 2000, because people were doing it through greed. They were chasing the .com stuff. Now it's a structural problem that market capitalization weighted mutual funds are just putting so much, because these companies have gotten so big that they are pro rata a very large part of the index. So that's going to be a problem when the market does go sideways. The problem, and people don't, you'll see people together in a group and they're all just on their phones. You know what I mean? Like sitting, I don't know if you, yeah.
This is sort of a vague question that I'm trying to get out, and I'm probably going to do a bad job at it. But I'm curious as to your thoughts on voter participation and how we can improve it, whether we should, whether that's something that you think would help your campaign if you just got more people to vote, or do we need more people who are more interested in these topics and looking at the big picture of things to vote? Because I know a lot of my friends were surprised by the result of the last general election. I know we're talking about state politics, but we saw this very clearly in the general election, that a lot of people were surprised by the turnout. They didn't expect it to go the way they did. And a lot of people on the losing side have told me that they felt that they were let down by the people that they were counting to show up to vote who didn't, and they actually permitted the result. But just in California, do we have the right people voting? Are they paying attention to the right things? As an independent, do you want everybody to vote, or do we need to lay some groundwork first before we can, really take advantage of that to improve things?
Yeah, a few things there. I mean, yes, I wish it was a lot easier for people to vote. I think everybody should vote. I think it's one person, one vote. That's what I believe in. That's a democracy. We don't live in a democracy. We live in a republic, where you elect your, representatives, of course. But I think more people